beyond the cause and effect of this material world. Now, when we think and talk about cause and effect of this material world, all right, so say, for example, here I have the whiteboard eraser. If I was to throw it, right, I was the mover, or I was the cause of the movement of that eraser. So why did it move? Because of me. Now, what we can do is we can trace a link of this, right? So what caused me? My parents, right? What caused my parents? Their parents. What caused their parents? And so on forth and so on forth, right? So then eventually we could keep doing that, right? Until we go all the way back to the first people. Exactly, right? And then what would we do next? Then we would come to the creation of those first people, right? And so eventually we keep going back and back and back. Now, what Brahman is beyond the cause and effect. So in other words, Brahman is that which always was, always is, and will always be. Brahman was never caused to come into being, because Brahman is being. Now you'll notice Brahman is not a being, Brahman is being. I know that's kind of a really cool idea. Brahman is not a being, Brahman is being, right? The eternal, the spirit, it lies beyond. Now, 14, this connects with what we're talking about with monism. Everywhere are his hands and legs, his eyes and faces. Oh, I love that. And he hears everything. In this way, the super soul exists. And this is a good way to think about Brahman, right? Outside of everything. And also at the same time, is everything, being the super soul. Oh, that's this beautiful, beautiful text. The super soul is the original source of all senses, yet he is without senses. How is that possible? How can you be without senses? We have, right, we all have these, our senses, right? Because we're part of the physical world, we're beings. He is unattached, not a being, but being. Although he is the maintainer of all living beings, he transcends the modes of nature and at the same time is the master of all modes of material nature. So Brahman is transcendent. In other words, you cannot fix Brahman down. Brahman is transcendent. Really cool. So now, let's jump back and get back to the PowerPoint. Okay, now, the third bullet point. The word incarnation, when we look at it, what we see, we can see the root word. Get my pen going. Here we go. We can see the root word right here, karm. And what karm means, it means flesh. The word in means within or to inhabit. So the word incarnation, what it means is to be put inside a fleshly body. And what is being put inside the fleshly body is the divine, the ultimate reality. So when Brahman takes on human form, then what we have is an incarnation. And these take the form of what we call avatars. And the avatars are worshipped as different gods and goddesses outright in devotional Hinduism. So for example, this would be a Hindu god. This is the Hindu god I mentioned earlier of mirth, which is happiness. Now, a lot of students, when they come into my office and they see this guy, they always call him the Buddha, which is incorrect. He's the Hindu god of mirth, but he does look like the Buddha. He has a big happy belly, which I can relate to, and he's holding a jug of wine, right? So he spends his time drinking and being merry and eating lots of sweets, lots of butter. So this is the Hindu god of mirth. He has a wonderful smile as well. Okay, Hinduism, right? There's one divine reality, Brahman. That's what this is to represent here. And there's many different gods. And Hinduism has a trinity. In other words, there's three principal gods. And they are Brahma. You'll notice that that's really close to Brahman, the spelling there. And what Brahma does, Brahma creates the world. And then hands it to Vishnu. And then Vishnu preserves it. Then when it's time, Vishnu hands things over to Shiva, who is the destroyer. And then, after Shiva destroys the world, the universe, guess what Brahma does? Brahma creates it anew, and then hands it to Vishnu, who preserves it. And then when it's time, Vishnu hands it to Shiva, who is the destroyer. And this cycle happens many different times. And that idea of the cycle or a wheel is something that's really important to remember, and it's very helpful as we dig through and start to develop more of these teachings of Hinduism. Okay, so we've covered what Brahman is, right? Brahman is not a being, right? But Brahman is what? Being, the oversoul, the ultimate reality. And then a being would be an example of the different Hindu gods and goddesses that are worshipped outright. And that's devotional. Now, when we have people like you and me, what's inside of each one of us is a little bit of Brahman. And what that's called is the Atman. Right? And a good way to think about this in monotheistic faiths of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, this is what would be called soul. So what makes a person is that little bit of Brahman, which is in each one of us. Now, when someone dies, what happens is that person is reborn and goes through another life and then dies, and then this process is repeated over and over and over again. And what this is called, it's commonly referred to as reincarnation, but a more proper term would be the transmigration of the soul. Transmigration of the soul. It's another word for reincarnation. So what happens after death is your Atman, or Atman, I'm in the south, it goes into another sentient being. It could go into a person, or it could go into, say for example, an animal. And what determines that is karma. Now that's a term that a lot of people in the West misuse and misunderstand. So in the next lecture, we're going to dive in and start off talking about karma.